Have you ever stopped to think why some people can do extraordinary things while others get paralyzed by the same fears we all feel? The difference isn't in the absence of fear. Actually, it's exactly the opposite of what you imagine. The most courageous people in history felt more fear, not less. The difference lies in the relationship they developed with that fear. Marcus Aurelius commanded armies against barbarian tribes while feeling terror of failing as emperor. Seneca navigated Rome's most dangerous politics while constantly fearing for his own life. Epictetus transformed the brutal experience of slavery into philosophical freedom while facing daily fears of torture and death. None of them eliminated their fears. They discovered something much more powerful: how to transform fear into fuel for greatness. And here's the truth that will completely change your perspective: your fears aren't flaws to be corrected. They're the only thing missing from your life to achieve everything you've always wanted. While you spend energy trying to avoid, hide, or eliminate your fears, you're wasting the most valuable resource you have for growth and personal fulfillment. Think with me for a moment. What's the difference between a person who lives a mediocre, safe life and another who builds something extraordinary? The extraordinary person doesn't feel less fear. They feel the same fear, but developed a completely different relationship with it. Instead of seeing fear as a danger signal, they see it as an opportunity signal. Instead of running from fear, they walk toward it. But before showing you exactly how to transform your fears into the most powerful force in your life, I need to destroy 3 dangerous myths that keep most people trapped in small, unsatisfying lives. The first myth is that courage means absence of fear. This is completely false and dangerous. Courage isn't not feeling fear. Courage is feeling fear and acting anyway. The most courageous people in history felt constant terror, but developed the ability to act despite fear, not in its absence. When you understand this, you stop trying to eliminate fear and start developing action muscles. The second myth is that fears are always irrational and should be ignored. This is partially true, but dangerously incomplete. Some fears are indeed irrational and limiting, but others are precise signals that you're about to grow, expand, or achieve something important. Fear of public speaking might indicate you need to develop this skill to advance in your career. Fear of relationships might reveal you need to work on vulnerability to find true love. The third myth is that you should wait to feel courageous before acting. This is the opposite of reality. You don't act because you feel courageous. You feel courageous because you act. Courage is a muscle that develops through practice, not a feeling that appears magically. Every time you act despite fear, you strengthen your ability to act next time. Now that we've destroyed these limiting myths, let me reveal the system Stoics developed to transform any fear into action power. They called this fear alchemy, the art of transforming emotional lead into behavioral gold. The first principle is the 3 circles of fear technique. Stoics discovered that every fear fits into one of 3 categories, and each category requires a completely different approach. Correctly identifying which circle your fear fits into is fundamental to knowing how to deal with it. The first circle are protection fears. These are evolutionary fears that exist to keep you alive and safe. Fear of heights, fear of dangerous animals, fear of genuinely risky situations. These fears should be respected, not eliminated. Wisdom lies in distinguishing between real danger and imaginary danger. Marcus Aurelius felt legitimate fear in battles, but didn't let this fear paralyze him when action was necessary. The second circle are growth fears. These are fears that arise when you're about to expand, evolve, or achieve something new. Fear of public speaking, fear of starting a business, fear of declaring yourself to someone, fear of changing careers. These fears are signals that you're on the right path, not the wrong path. They indicate exactly where your greatest development opportunities lie. The third circle are ego fears. These are fears based on how others will perceive you, judge you, or react to you. Fear of rejection, fear of criticism, fear of looking foolish, fear of not being perfect. These fears are almost always illusory and limiting. They exist to protect a self-image that probably isn't even real or useful. The technique consists of taking any fear you're feeling and honestly identifying which circle it fits into. First circle fears require intelligent caution. Second circle fears require courageous action. Third circle fears require dissolution through philosophical perspective. The second principle is Stoic fear inversion. Instead of asking, how can I eliminate this fear, you ask, what is this fear trying to teach me, and how can I use this fear as fuel for growth? This perspective shift transforms you from a victim of fear into a student of fear. Seneca practiced an exercise where he listed all his fears and then wrote next to each one which virtue he could develop by facing that specific fear. Fear of poverty developed detachment and gratitude. Fear of death developed presence and healthy urgency. Fear of rejection developed authenticity and emotional independence. The practical technique is creating a list of your 5 biggest fears and identifying which positive quality each fear can develop in you if faced consciously. Fear of public speaking can develop confidence and communication skills. Fear of starting a business can develop entrepreneurial courage and tolerance for uncertainty. Fear of relationships can develop vulnerability and capacity for intimacy. The third principle is minimal courageous action. Instead of trying to face your biggest fears all at once, you break each fear into actions so small they're impossible to avoid, but big enough to generate real growth. It's like developing physical muscles. You don't start lifting maximum weight, but gradually increase resistance. Epictetus taught that courage is like any other skill, it develops through progressive practice. If you fear public speaking, don't start trying to give a lecture to 1,000 people. Start by asking a question in a small meeting. If you fear starting a business, don't start trying to create a multinational company. Start by selling something small to a friend. The technique consists of taking your biggest fear and identifying the smallest possible action you can take today that brings you closer to facing that fear. The action should be small enough that you can't justify not doing it, but significant enough that you feel you're growing. Do this minimal action every day for a week, then slightly increase the challenge level. The fourth principle is philosophical recontextualization of fear. Stoics understood that fear is almost always about things that might happen in the future, not about what's happening now. When you bring your attention completely to the present moment, most fears simply disappear because they exist only in imagination. Marcus Aurelius practiced an exercise where, whenever he felt fear, he asked himself, what exactly is happening now, in this moment? Almost always the answer was, nothing dangerous is happening now. I'm just imagining future scenarios. This perception immediately reduced fear intensity and allowed clear action. The practical technique is using the question, what's really happening now, whenever you feel paralyzing fear. Separate facts from interpretations, present reality from future projections, real danger from imaginary danger. Most of the time you'll discover that fear exists only in your mind, not in current reality. The fifth principle is transforming fear into purpose. Stoics discovered that the deepest fears usually point to the most important desires. If you're very afraid of failing at something, it's probably because that something is very important to you. If you fear being rejected by someone, it's probably because that person means a lot to you. Seneca wrote that our greatest fears are maps of our greatest treasures. What you most fear losing reveals what you most value. What you most fear trying reveals what you most desire to achieve. What you most fear facing reveals where you most need to grow. The technique consists of taking your 3 biggest fears and asking, what does this fear reveal about what's really important to me, and how can I use this fear as a compass to direct my energy and actions? Transform each fear into a purpose statement and use it as motivation for courageous action. Now I'll show you exactly how to implement these 5 principles through a practical 21-day protocol that will completely reprogram your relationship with fear. In the first 7 days, focus exclusively on the 3 circles technique. Make a complete list of all the fears you can identify in your life, from small to big. For each fear, honestly identify whether it belongs to the protection circle, growth circle, or ego circle. For protection circle fears, develop intelligent precaution strategies without paralysis. For growth circle fears, create gradual action plans. For ego circle fears, practice detachment exercises and philosophical perspective. This classification will completely change how you relate to each fear. On days 8 to 14, implement Stoic fear inversion while maintaining the previous practice. For each identified fear, especially those in the growth circle, write which virtue or positive quality you can develop by facing that fear. Change your question from, how to avoid this fear, to, how to use this fear to become a better person. Create a journal where you daily record how each faced fear contributed to your personal growth. This documentation will create tangible evidence that fear is fuel for development, not an obstacle to happiness. On days 15 to 21, complete the protocol by implementing minimal courageous action. Choose a growth circle fear and break it into the smallest possible action you can take today. Do this action every day, gradually increasing the challenge level. If the fear is public speaking, start by asking a question in a meeting. If it's starting a business, start by researching an idea for 15 minutes. If it's exercising, start by putting on gym shoes. The important thing is creating momentum through small but consistent actions. Throughout the protocol, use philosophical recontextualization whenever you feel paralyzing fear. Ask, what's really happening now, and bring your attention to the present moment. Use fear into purpose transformation to identify what your fears reveal about your deepest values and desires. After 21 days, you'll notice a fundamental change in your relationship with fear. Instead of seeing fear as an enemy, you'll see it as valuable information. Instead of avoiding situations that generate fear, you'll seek them as growth opportunities. Instead of feeling weak for having fears, you'll feel strong for facing them. Also implement the Stoic practice of weekly review where you analyze which fears you faced, which you avoided, and how you can better prepare for next week's challenges. This conscious reflection dramatically accelerates your development of courage and wisdom. Use the principle of progressive expansion where you gradually face bigger fears as you develop confidence with smaller ones. Like an athlete who progressively increases the weight they lift, you'll develop increasingly stronger courage muscles. Remember that the goal isn't to eliminate all fears, but to develop a healthy and productive relationship with them. Legitimate protection fears should be respected. Growth fears should be faced. Ego fears should be dissolved through philosophical perspective. Stoics understood something that modern psychology confirms: people who systematically avoid their fears become progressively weaker and more limited, while people who consciously face their fears become progressively stronger and freer. The difference isn't in the presence or absence of fear, but in the response to fear. Think with me for a moment. What would your life be like if you were never again controlled by irrational fears? What would it be like to wake up every day knowing you can face any challenge because you've developed a healthy relationship with discomfort? What would it be like to have the freedom to pursue your most important dreams because you transformed fear into fuel for action? This isn't an impossible fantasy. It's the natural result of consistently applying Stoic principles of fear transformation. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus proved it works by facing challenges much greater than anything you'll probably face. If it worked for them under these extreme conditions, it can work for you in any situation. The difference between people who live small, safe lives and people who build something extraordinary isn't in the absence of fear. It's in the ability to use fear as a compass for growth instead of an excuse for stagnation. This is true courage, not the absence of fear, but the transformation of fear into wisdom and action. Comment below which of the 5 Stoic principles impressed you most and which fear you'll start facing using these techniques. I want to know how the wisdom of the great Stoic masters will transform your relationship with fear and unlock the extraordinary life you always knew was possible. And if this content changed your perspective on courage and fear, leave your like and subscribe to the channel because I have much more transformative wisdom to share with you.